Hello everybody. Fans of James Joyce called today, the 16th of June, Bloom Day. Bloom being the main character in his huge novel Ulysses. Leopold Bloom's day is followed through his interaction with all sorts of different people, and you get a feeling of what's going on in his mind all the time. And that's what made it, for me, quite difficult to read, and I'm afraid I never got very far. T.S. Eliot described people who couldn't cope with Ulysses as uneducated and undisciplined coxcombs. Well, that's told me. But it was not only the length, 682 pages in my copy, but it was this what's now become known as the stream of consciousness, this way of telling the story from inside somebody's mind. And of course, when you're following somebody's thoughts in anything that's remotely realistic, they jump all over the place, and there are things that don't connect and things that don't follow, and this is what happens. I mean, I couldn't manage it, but it made me think about my own stream of consciousness, and that actually what goes on in my mind is much the same. I'm jumping around from one thing to another, finding one thing distracts me from something I was thinking about before, and it's sometimes quite confusing following what's going on in my head, and yet it's mine. You know, I think that it doesn't matter if it's a bit confusing. If it's me, I just don't particularly want to hear about Leopold Bloom's. It seems to me that it's important, though, to think occasionally about what does go on in our heads. For Jesus, it was really important. You perhaps remember that conversation he had with some of the Jewish leaders, in which he made it perfectly clear that he didn't think the outward action, particularly any ritualistic actions that the Jews were recommending, were what was important. What was important was what goes on inside, what's happening in your mind and in your heart. And later on in the New Testament, St. Paul spells this out very clearly in writing to the Philippians. He says, whatsoever is true, whatsoever is honourable, whatsoever is just, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is pleasing, whatsoever is commendable, think on these things. Make sure that your mind, your thinking is concentrating on things that are good and beautiful and nourishing. The trouble is, that doesn't always happen. And we don't always feel we've got control over what's going on in our heads. Things sort of bob up out of nowhere. Sometimes we're glad to have that thought. Sometimes we're glad to have the thought but feel we shouldn't be glad. And at other times, we don't want it. And I think what's worth remembering today is that we are actually perfectly allowed to tell our thoughts to go away. You know, if there's something happening in our stream of consciousness that we don't like, or that hurts us, or that is not something that we feel is as loving as it should be, we can tell that thought to go away. And there's no guarantee it won't come back again, of course, but at least we're exercising some control, and as time goes on, such control begins to change things so that those thoughts become less common and less bob up less frequently. And so today I'm going to be a bit more aware of my own stream of consciousness and remind myself that if there's something there that I don't want in my head, I'm perfectly entitled to get packing.